Dear Michigan, it was a bit alarming to learn you're considering giving $50 million to an inexperienced foreign company for resource extraction on your own soil. The media was all ready to call it a done deal. Just look at this headline. Copperwood Mine Project receives $50 million grant. But then you click the link and, sorry, it's gone. Now the news reads a bit differently. But geez, that was a close call. Apparently, if it hadn't been for a few Michigan Strategic Fund board members expressing their doubts, the grant would have been approved with no input from your own residents. It would have felt like a shady backroom deal in the dead of night. It would have left a pretty sour taste in our mouths. Thank God for folks expressing doubts, right? But it isn't over yet, is it, Michigan? Now we hear the grant decision has been deferred to a so-called expedited subcommittee. Well, we've got a few thoughts which might help expedite that process further. Let's start with a question to those whose votes will determine the fate of the Copperwood mine. Have you ever actually been up here? We won't hold it against you if the answer's no. We know it's a long drive. But you definitely should have some familiarity with the area before you turn it in to the front lines of extraction. We'll make this short. Copperwood would be the closest sulfide mine to Lake Superior in history. Much of the mining infrastructure would be a literal stone's throw from the North Country Trail, just recently incorporated into the National Park Service. And Copperwood's entrance road would be a 15-second drive to Porcupine Mountains Wilderness State Park, which, in addition to representing both the largest wilderness area in mainland Michigan and the largest mixed old-growth forest remaining in the Midwest, was recently ranked as the most beautiful state park in the whole country. Before continuing Michigan, please ask yourself, does right in the heart of one of your most beloved outdoor recreation areas really seem like a good place for a mine? And who exactly are we entrusting with this dubious endeavor? None other than Highland Copper, a Canadian company with zero on-paper mining experience. Though they do already have some experience violating permits and degrading wetlands. But let's not get bogged down in details. Next, Michigan, please consider the politics up here. The Upper Peninsula is known to be more conservative than downstate, so how exactly will locals interpret this $50 million check, funded by taxpayers and granted to a foreign enterprise? You call it a grant, but some might see it as a government subsidy interfering with the free market. I mean, if Copperwood is as lucrative as Highland Copper claims, then why is it that after a decade they still lack 90% of their necessary funding? Where are all the investors rushing in to take advantage of this amazing business opportunity? And why did their CEO step down just a few months ago, with no explanation whatsoever? Could it be that Copperwood isn't such a slam dunk after all, which is why they've come groveling at your doorstep? Grant, subsidy. Folks might even see it as a handout to a company which can't stand on its own 2 feet. I mean, it's been over a decade and they still haven't started construction. They just keep pushing the date back again and again and again. Take a moment to ask yourself, why is that? Of course, they say Copperwood is going to create jobs for Michiganders. Great, but how many? Will it be like the White Pine Mine, which employed over 3,000 people back in the 1970s? Well, no. 5 years ago, Highland Copper projected around 250 mining jobs. Somehow that figure has now shot up to 380. Where did all those new jobs come from? Could it be that, as they grow desperate for funding, they're inventing jobs out of thin air to puff up their resume? Not trying to be cynical here, but extractive companies do have a history of overpromising during the pitch, then under-delivering once reality kicks in. For example, Eagle Mine in Marquette County originally projected around 250 mining jobs too, but now it seems they employ fewer than 80. Will Copperwood follow the same pattern? Plus, many of the best-paying jobs won't go to Michiganders at all. They're extracting the copper here, sure, but then they're shipping it out of country for processing. Part 1913 of their 2023 feasibility report discusses the need for downstream refining and smelting. Several smelters could receive concentrate, with nearby candidates being located in Quebec or Ontario. Other alternatives include seaborne export to Asia and Europe. Though something tells me they'll settle on Canada. Don't ask me why. And remember, Copperwood is only expected to run for around 11 years. That's a decent career if measured in dog years. But for us humans, what happens when the mine closes and there's no similar employment in the area? Won't folks follow the Canadian company's example and get the heck out of there as fast as possible? I guess that's why they call it boom and bust. Basing an economy on mining is a bit like basing your diet on cocaine. You get real high for a short while, but then you get real low for a long time. This is the nature of the resource curse, also known as the paradox of plenty, which is the phenomenon of areas with an abundance of natural resources exhibiting less economic growth, less democracy, and worse development outcomes than areas with fewer natural resources. It's also been called the Dutch disease, referring to the case of Holland's massive North Sea oil revenues actually resulting in declining rather than improving economic outcomes. Just take a look at this study, the most comprehensive ever conducted on the economics of rural mining communities, which analyzes literally all of the relevant quantitative findings, comprising 301 cases in total. Contrary to long-established assumptions, roughly half of all published findings indicate negative economic outcomes in mining communities, with the remaining findings split evenly between favorable and neutral indeterminate ones. Of those 29% which were actually positive, over half come from the years prior to 1982. The study concludes, there is surprisingly little evidence that mining will bring about economic good times, while there is a good deal of evidence for expecting just the opposite. They say this area is poor, and so it needs the mine. Turns out, it's mining which made this area poor in the first place. Among the economic drawbacks of mining is the problem of flickering, the periodic shutting down of operations as the price of the metal fluctuates above and below the costs of operation. This flickering can contribute to unemployment and poverty, as laid-off workers choose to remain in the area, sometimes for extended periods, in the hope that the high-wage jobs will return. Flickering is what has defined Copperwood's entire decade of non-existence thus far. The flickering of funding, the flickering of proposed startup dates, the flickering of CEOs. Is there any reason to think this won't continue if the mine ever gets up and running? Some say the company is awaiting a rise in the price of copper to make the project viable. Fair enough. But once the mine begins operation, what happens if the price of copper plunges? But forget all that, Michigan, because they need your $50 million. They really do. Just listen to Highland Copper's new interim CEO, Barry O'Shea, who happens to be their former chief financial officer, so he knows a thing or two about money. Quote, I can tell you with certainty that an award of this nature will move the needle significantly in terms of how our debt providers and our equity investors look at our company. It's not only a large financial boost for the project, but it is a true endorsement. He doesn't even try to hide it. They want to use your official state endorsement as leverage to woo private investors and take out debt. Does that really seem like an appropriate use of state funding? You know, Michigan, if you gave me $50 million, I could make a lot of new friends too, and it would certainly help my credit rating. But that doesn't mean it's a good idea, or a fair one. Just to be clear, we're not trying to be xenophobic. There's absolutely nothing wrong with foreign companies. But we aren't talking about a nice Pakistani family opening a delicious restaurant downtown, are we? No, we're talking industrial-scale resource extraction on another nation's soil. Imagine if it was a Chinese company, or a Saudi company, or, God forbid, a Russian company coming in to take our copper and ship it out of country. Why, people would be up in arms. But since they're Canadian, we give them a pass because why exactly? And quite a few of their principal financiers are foreign too, like Kentera Capital, a private equity firm based out of Toronto. Kentera purchased 66% of Highland Copper's White Pine North mine, thus becoming the majority shareholder. So Michigan, what makes you think they aren't hoping for another company to come along and take Copperwood off their hands? You give them $50 million today, but tomorrow they're not even the ones in charge. Seems like kind of an uncertain situation. But wait, Michigan. Ding, ding, ding. I think they've already found a buyer for the Copperwood mine. It's you. $50 million is a big chunk of change. In fact, it's more than Highland Copper's $40 million market cap. So a grant of this size would effectively make you the majority shareholder of the Copperwood mine. That means Copperwood would be your mine, Michigan. Are you really sure about this? The acquisition might not win you as many fans as you're expecting. For many, you won't just be subsidizing the extraction of copper. You'll be subsidizing explosives plants, sewage lagoons, exhaust systems, and a tailings disposal facility right next to the North Country Trail. You'll be subsidizing the degradation of the stars and the northern lights at the Presque Isle Campground in Porcupine Mountain State Park, because Copperwood would be the one and only source of artificial lighting within a 5-mile radius. You'll also be subsidizing rock grinding, subterranean blasting, and non-stop industrial trucking, none of which mix particularly well with the peace and quiet of hiking, hunting, fishing, and foraging. You may even be subsidizing mining right underneath the state park itself. Since the DNR doesn't own the mineral rights, Highland Copper is planning to mine the deposit under Section 5 of park property. They're even eyeing deposits underneath old-growth forest on the other side of the Presque Isle River. But listen up, Michigan. The main thing you'll be subsidizing is waste. Since Copperwood's ore grade is only 1.5%, for every ton of extracted material, only 30 pounds will be copper, and 1,970 pounds will be sulfide-bearing heavy metal-laden waste. Yeesh. Good thing that stuff evaporates, right? Well, actually it doesn't. So they'll need to store it on-site, forever, over 50 million tons in total, piling higher and higher in something called a tailings disposal facility. Michigan, do you know what a tailings disposal facility is? This thing will be 244 football fields in area and 20 feet higher than the Statue of Liberty from toes to torch tip. It will tower over the landscape and even be visible from the Lake of the Clouds overlook. And it'll be erected at the juncture of streams which have been artificially rerouted into unstable 90-degree angles on topography which slopes towards Lake Superior. Lake Superior, Michigan. We're talking the largest, wildest, and cleanest of all the Great Lakes. We're talking 10% of the Earth's surface fresh water. We're talking the biggest freshwater sea on the planet. P.S. Did you know that tailings facilities are not invincible? In fact, the evidence shows that, despite technological advances, the frequency of serious tailings dam ruptures is actually increasing, specifically due to low ore grade mines like Copperwood creating massive quantities of waste, which is unwieldy to contain.
It may be the worst environmental disaster in British Columbia's history. Yesterday morning, 10 million cubic meters of wastewater containing dangerous chemicals poured into local waterways when the earthen dam surrounding a tailings pond collapsed.
At a packed community meeting, the company said it takes full responsibility, but it doesn't know why it happened.
Before making such a big investment, we suggest looking into the Mount Polley mine, designed and operated by experts at the top of the field in Canada. Mount Polley complied with strict environmental regulations, but the dam still burst, spilling toxic sludge for miles and crippling an outdoor recreation economy much like our own.
You know, we're known as a pristine, beautiful lakes and rivers, and I don't know all what's happened in there, but right now we can't take people fishing.
So be aware, there's a chance you'll be remembered not just for subsidizing the construction of this massive facility, but as the responsible party for the catastrophic contamination of Lake Superior, less than 2 miles downstream. Even assuming the dam holds, this 2012 peer-reviewed study examining 14 copper mines responsible for 89% of U.S. production found that 13 out of 14 failed to control contaminated mine seepage, resulting in significant water quality impacts, and every single one of them experienced pipeline spills or other accidental releases. Those numbers aren't exactly encouraging. Thank God we're not dealing with the closest sulfide mine to Lake Superior in history, right? Oh, wait. And company maps clearly indicate that the highest grade copper is closest to the lakeshore. For now, Highland Copper plans to mine up to 100 feet from the coast. But if it weren't for those pesky permits, they'd love to mine right under the lake itself. At a time when the earth is getting hotter and drier, is it wise to endanger it in such a way? How exactly is this in keeping with your healthy climate plan? And because this is a foreign company we're dealing with, and because the mine will board up shop after a decade or two at most, there's a good chance that the culprits won't be around to be held accountable for any environmental fallout. And if they are accosted, they can just declare bankruptcy to get off the hook, so the bill will be footed by you yourself, Michigan, which really means by us, the taxpayers. Anyhow, it's getting late and we've all got stuff to do. We're glad you've got money to spare and you want to help the Upper Peninsula. Well, here's a suggestion for how to do it. Rather than perpetuating the resource curse, be the magic kiss to help us break it. It starts by recognizing that the true heritage of the Upper Peninsula isn't mining, but all of our incredible nature. In the 21st century, is there anything scarcer than a good view of the stars? Is there anything scarcer than a peaceful hike without a single sound of civilization? Is there anything scarcer than a vast sea of good, clean, fresh water? Certainly not copper. The United States exports 10 times as much as it imports, which is why it was just recently rejected an upgrade to critical mineral status. So rather than give millions to a foreign company to extract your resources and ship them back to Canada or Europe or Asia, consider using those funds to expand and protect your own natural areas. Outdoor recreation contributes over 10 times as much to your economy as mining does. And it doesn't jeopardize freshwater resources, nor does nature board up shop after 10 years and leave folks unemployed. So it's a win-win for everybody, and it's a much better long-term investment for you. Thanks for listening, Michigan. We trust you'll reach a sound judgment on the use of that $50 million. Take care.